Welcome back, college basketball fans, to Hoops HD. This is our
Woohoo!
Hoops HD report.
I'm David.
I'm your host, Chad Sherwood,
I'm
joined
David.
by Matt Sikowski,
I'm David.
Jason, John
David is here.
Salika. Who?
Don't forget David. You always forget to introduce me.
David Griggs.
Every week.
I've got other things to do. We got not that much time here to do the shows, David. I can't waste my time with doing things like introducing you, can I?
He's not supposed to be. Oh, you have time for everybody else. If Tytel was here, you would have had time for him.
Well, yeah. Well, he's got it more important than you, isn't he?
No. He's not the one that's out here fighting the dark web.
This is our Hoops HD report. We've got a lot of stuff to go over tonight. Busy weekend, a lot of upsets this past weekend in college basketball. But I want to start with what happened Sunday before the games even began, which was when the NCAA Selection Committee announced its, I guess we call it the current bracket. I don't know if it's really a mock bracket preview or the like. I'll put it up on the screen here. There it is, a screenshot of what they did. And this was after several upsets of I think everybody on the one line other than Xavier before they announced that. But Joby, let me start with you. Your Virginia team, despite the loss to Vodtech, number one overall there.
Well, I'm glad the committee took in the whole body of work. The quote the committee had was the number of wins, quadrant one wins coming over. I think that Villanova and Virginia are just so tight right now on their resumes. You can't really fault it either way, even with the loss for both teams last week. The JNG, which is Hoops HD's computer program, so to speak, it had 15 of the 16 the committee did, and 15 of 16 within one seed. Now it's at the top of the bracket, it's a little easier, but still, the committee did what, in my opinion, across the board, what we expected. And the JNG is Virginia number one, and that's not of a biased component because Villanova held that spot most of the season, second half of the season. So Virginia's resume is there. Villanova's is too. I think they're, as of right now, barring falling apart or multiple more seeds, that's who you're going to see as the overall number one seed, either Virginia or Villanova. Don't read too much into this that Virginia has it sewn up.
Right.
Well,
I was just going to say, you had mentioned like you have to factor in the whole body of work. You do have to factor in that Virginia Tech loss. And when you factor it in and you look at their profile, they still have a win at Duke. So in factoring it in, they got it right. Virginia Tech is the top number one. Or Virginia is the top number one.
Yeah, Virginia Tech is not number one seed. When I was looking at this before they made the announcement, I thought that the top three teams, Virginia, Nova, Xavier, were the top three teams clearly. Beyond that, for the first time this season, though, Matt, let me ask you this. I saw up to 8 teams that could have been that last one seed, from Purdue, any of the 2 seeds, even down to teams like Texas Tech, Michigan State, Clemson on the 3 line there. Would you agree with me that we're really wide open right now for who that 4th 1 seed is? Matt, do we have you?
All right.
I think that is open. There we go.
All right, we're having some audio problems there. Slick, let me ask you the same question. What do you think about that?
Well, if you saw my bracket, I would have actually chosen Texas Tech, in part because I am looking at the whole body of work. I'm not just focusing on a non-conference strength of schedule that was bad, but also looking at a bunch of conference games where Texas has started to become a clear leader in the Big 12. They still have one more major test at home against Kansas, but they're certainly well on their way, even if it's not a 1 seed, to either at least remaining at the 3 or possibly jumping up to a 2. I think Kansas is another team that probably could be a 1 if you just go by their wins, but too many losses compared to other teams is probably what's keeping them at 2 right now.
Well, David, I said you go all the way down to some teams of those 3 line there, because what about this Michigan State team? 3 seed, 11th overall by the committee, number 1 today in the coaches poll, number 2 in the AP poll.
I'm not as impressed by Michigan State as everybody else seems to be. I know that they've managed to win, and that's the important thing. But before that big win against Purdue, they needed to really sweat out an Iowa team that they trailed for most of the game. Now, they did come back to win, and they had to sweat out Indiana before that. And, again, their quality wins just seem limited to me when compared to what we normally see out of a 1 seed. I'm not as big on Michigan State, either on paper or on the court, as I am on pretty much the entire rest of the 2 line. Like, Duke beat them. Texas Tech won at Kansas, and they're in first place in a much harder conference. I agree with Stalika. I like Texas Tech more than I do Michigan State. Just about everybody else on the 2 or the 3 line, I think, has done a better job than Michigan State. Although I might have them I think I had them 11th, and I would have had them ahead of North Carolina.
Well, Matt, let me ask you this question. This is now the second year in a row the committee has done this. Is this exercise worthwhile? Do you gain anything from this, or do you think it's just more to appease kind of the less involved fans than we are, and it really doesn't show you much because we are still a month away from the real Selection Sunday?
Well, I said last year, 15 of the 16 teams in last year's top 16 ended up as protected seeds. So there was some track record last year. I think it's a little more open this year than like Oklahoma, and especially Arizona. That's what I don't know what they saw. Sorry, John T., that Arizona is not a protected seed in my eyes. In fact, I think they're either a 6 or 7 if you're being totally honest with what their season is and not what you expected them to be.
I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and pull this down here, and instead let's go over to some of the standings. Should be coming up in a second here. And Joby, I want to start things off in the Big East here, where what a Saturday we had, where we saw DePaul, Georgetown, and St. John's all win on the same day.
Amazing. Yeah, there was a stat with the last time Duke and North Carolina lost at home was 1974. If we play if the Big East keeps its form long enough, we might have a similar stat. Remember back in 2018 when all 3 of these teams won on the same day. Amazing. It shows that there is never a game. There's no sure things in college basketball. It's one of the reasons why we all love the sport. When a St. John's, who's been awful, just god awful, reels off 3, not, you beat Duke, amazing, in the Garden, you caught Duke on a bad day or whatever, you can wipe it off, but great win. Then you go out and you beat Villanova. Out of Villanova, you're going, oh my goodness. And then you think, well, they must have used everything in their tank, and sorry, Matt, bad memories here.
Kimura Todd clearly did it.
But it's amazing to go out and then beat a Marquette team who is desperate, fighting for a tournament bid, can ill afford that loss, unfortunately, Matt, but fight legitimate shot at a tournament bid, and they go out and win that game too.
Before all that started, they almost beat Xavier, so that's quite a stretch.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say for the 0-11 start, a lot of those losses were close.
Yeah.
It's not like they're 0-11 and losing by 20 every night.
And St. John's, if you look at their RPI, it is 67th, which means that a road win is a quadrant run win. So, like a quadrant run win, as we learned from Jay Billis today, for those that follow her on Twitter, a win at St. John's is just as valuable as a win at Villanova. Quadrant run win.
Yeah, and just as good as a win at Ryder, also according to him. Because clearly all the committee does is
clearly they don't differentiate between.
Don't look at the actual teams you pick.
Yeah. Oh God. Anyway,
there's more information on the team sheets than what quadrant the wins were in. They also include who you actually beat, and so stop whining about this. People like Jay Billis. That's all I got to say. But
well, it just shows that Billis doesn't understand the process of why he did the whole Michigan State. They're a 1 seed. He's shocked today. Anyone who actually does work, and actually anyone who watches games.
I like Jay Billis, but it was just a bizarre comment.
I mean, anyone who watches games knows Michigan State wasn't a 1 seed. But hey, they have Spartans on the uniform, and great. Yeah.
Well, I got to say this, though, about the Big East. This was a bad week almost across the board. I mean, Seton Hall with an 0-2 week, Providence with a bad loss, Marquette with a real bad, with that after the win at Seton Hall, turns around and gives it all back with the St. John's loss. But, Salika, your team, Xavier, had an incredible week with wins at Butler and at Creighton, and now is the one team in the Big East that is really trending up.
Yeah, they were trending up, but they certainly were in close games in both Butler and Creighton. At Butler, they were up as early as 17 in the first half before Butler made a run to close that out. They led by as much as 6 in the second half, but Xavier was able to extend that game into overtime and ended up holding off the Bulldogs. But at the same time, the Creighton game, I think, was another example of probably a couple kind whistles toward the end of that game. But
Well,
I think
one
it's
in
the other
particular.
thing that the puppet had also pointed out, even with Trayvon Blewett being shut down by Kyrie Thomas of Creighton, they still managed to get the ball into Quentin Gooden's hands at the end of that one, draw the foul, but still hit a pair of clutch free throws in front of 17,000 screaming fans. There's a reason
17
why Xavier is on the one line this week.
Oh, it was great. It was an atrocious. Well, it was a questionable whistle, and that's being kind. And he hit 2 clutch free throws in front of 17,000 angry people. It was something to see.
David, I got to ask you there. You see the upcoming games that I just highlighted one there, and obviously the game this season in the Big East is the one on top there coming up tomorrow night, Bemidji State at Creighton.
I would like to. I've been really hard on Greg McDermott and how he does once February rolls around. I don't think this is the way to correct that. This is just what the hell are they doing? I don't understand this at all.
But seriously, the one I did highlight, Villanova Xavier, game potential 2-1 seeds battling on Saturday.
Yeah, if they're able to hold serve earlier in the week, Xavier should be able to. They're at home against Seton Hall, and Nova doesn't play until Saturday.
No, they have
No. They're at Providence is rough. Xavier fell there, and with Nova's lack of depth, I think they're down to just 6 players in their rotation now. It's no guarantee that both those teams are going to win that game and go into the Saturday. Well, they're going to be ranked what they are, but they don't want to look past what they have during the week.
Yeah, below the Big Two, I think Seton Hall has the really big week here because they get a major chance at revenge going to Xavier on Wednesday, but they're also going to be hosting a suddenly dangerous DePaul team the following Sunday. I mean, it's easy to say yes, DePaul probably had their best day of the year at Providence, but they came real close to picking off Creighton at home midweek.
I got to say, Matt, I disagree with him. I think that the game, the most important game in terms of bubble, especially, is your Marquette team at Creighton on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's actually – this is a more gettable game that probably would look number-wise than that. Saturday was the first time I saw Creighton play without Martin Krampel, and I think they miss him. They miss him a fair amount. They've had 3 of the 4 Big East losses without him. And inside, especially offensively, they're strictly a perimeter team now. They have no interior threat on offense. So that's one. If Marquette's defense could be just okay, not horrid, and they don't have like Marcus Foster, Jewish, Shamori Pons on them, I think there is some upset possibility here.
Well, let's move over to the ACC. Joby, Virginia coming off of the win at Florida State, just gave it all back with the loss at home to Va Tech. But still number 1 overall. So, how much did they really give back, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, how many times are you going to have a 90% free throw shooter miss 2 of his 3 free throws down the stretch, including the front end of a one-on-one to put it away? I mean, hey, everybody says, oh, they need a – this will test the theory of does everybody need a loss?
That's a moronic theory.
I don't think when it's 2 for your in-state rival at home and all that, I don't know how much, I would go buy into that. Virginia still very much controls its path to winning the regular season at the ACC. Still, they're going to have a very tough matchup this week in Miami. But then here's the interesting thing. Virginia has 8 days off after that. 8 days. rust or whatever, but with DeAndre Hunter having ankle issues, Nigel Johnson having to get back into rhythm, the rest is actually probably a very good thing that Virginia is going to face before a nice run in the NCAAs after that. Nice ACC finish in NCAAs.
If I go by the standings here, I'd argue that Clemson had the most time off this week because everyone's been beating up on the Panthers this year.
Yeah. The other thing, Benji State available. Virginia opting not to schedule Benji State.
Well, the one impressive thing.
What's that?
The one impressive note I want to say about the conference, though, is North Carolina with their win. I know we'll get to them, but North Carolina with their win tonight had Duke Thursday, NC State in Raleigh on Saturday, and now Notre Dame. I know they're banged up, but they're still a quality team. Notre Dame at the end of all that, 3 games, 5 days, the first 2 in particular, very tough opponents. Carolina, maybe more, even better than that 12 seed overall spot the committee gave them, I'm starting to think.
Yeah, David, I want to go to exactly that thing here. In Carolina, great week, including a win over Duke team that I believe is very close to them in terms of mileage.
8 miles is what I was made to understand.
8 miles.
Yeah, and it's always fun when these two teams play. Yeah. It's always fun when these two teams play.
Go ahead,
it's the premier rivalry in college basketball. They play at least twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year if they meet in the conference tournament, but they've never played in the NCAA tournament.
That's amazing. But David, let me stick with you for a second for the upcoming schedule in the ACC. There it is on the screen. What are you really looking forward to this week?
Miami's got they might be swinging over their heads, but I think that they're safely in the bubble, but they could certainly improve their seed with that win. Boston College, Pittsburgh, I will not be watching that. In fact, I am putting the parental lock on my television so I don't even accidentally turn that game on. What's Louisville got? North Carolina at Louisville, because Louisville is slipping closer and closer towards the bubble. I've been saying they're safe, but Titel actually had them in his first 4. Stalika, who's also not the guessing expert that Titel has, had them out. That is a big game for them at home. It's the kind of game that if they were able to win, I think it would add some stability to a resume that needs some stability. So that's a big one. Yeah. NC State at Syracuse, again, another one there. Syracuse right on the bubble, so every game with kind of a pivotal feel.
And the J&E had Louisville the first team out.
There.
Yeah.
He had Louisville the first team out right now.
And more of a showcase game than sort of an urgency game, but that Duke-Clemson game should be fun.
I'd point out Clemson, Florida State, too, for Florida State's case. Florida State, I think, should be in okay shape, but now 6 and 7, they lose that 6 and 8. You don't want to get too far behind under 500 in conference to where I think 8 and 10 they probably sneak in, but 7 and 11, they might also be in some trouble here.
They get Pitt at the end of the week at home, though, Matt.
Yeah.
All right. Let's jump over to the Big Ten here, where Ohio State 13-1. We already had a little debate there about Michigan State and Purdue at the top of the show. But that game this week, Michigan State did pick up the huge home win over Purdue. Stalika, what about Michigan? A little bit of a slip there. Are they in any danger at all, or are they still safely in your field?
It's certainly not advisable losing at Northwestern. They started off the game at Wisconsin looking pretty dominant, although they did let the Badgers get into that one later on. But at the same time, I'm not too concerned about Michigan at least being in the 5-hole because unlike the team above them, they've played a much more difficult schedule in conference when you consider they play Ohio State twice, they played Purdue twice. They've also played Maryland twice, if I'm not mistaken. Whereas Nebraska, they're playing teams at the bottom twice, like Rutgers, Minnesota. That's going to be a bit of a problem for them if they want to remain on the bubble.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah, David, we got Michigan solidly in fourth place there, right? Because anybody above them has been removed from the conference.
No, that's wrong. That is wrong. That is wrong. And again, I'm doing research. I don't have that, but I've put together. It's on Twitter. I don't have it with me today, but it is on Twitter. A list of indisputable evidence about this conspiracy against Nebraska, and it's how it's coming from the dark web. And it is clear. I mean, it's just clear. They're right. Did you know that, for instance, like every time Tim Miles tells the referees how stupid they are, they just don't listen. They just keep – it's if he didn't say anything. 18 of their last games are against Power 5 teams. I mean, that's clearly a backloaded schedule to try and throw them off. This is all stuff. This is all true. And the evidence just keeps mounting and mounting.
And Nebraska being 10-4 in a conference is decided it's not a power conference this year.
Right. And again, like, can we see, like, they're the power numbers up there. The RPI, it's not 54. It's clear that their numbers have been hacked by the dark web.
But strength of record, they'd be in.
Joby, what about Penn State at a 44? Some of those numbers are good. Does this team have any shot? There was a couple people on Twitter that thought that this team had a chance to make the NCAA tournament at this point.
They're the same people who think there's a dark web conspiracy against Nebraska. No chance.
No, I don't think that Penn State has a chance.
The best thing that Penn State has going for it right now is not for Penn State, but that they have, with their couple of recent wins and getting to that 18-9 record, their RPI has actually climbed out of the hundreds and to 86. And with that 86, you help the entire conference, because I was on this show a few weeks ago. 8 teams with RPIs over 100. That's a big deal. That marker has a big psychological impact on the committee. Now, if they can get a few more wins, you win at Penn State, it's a quadrant 1 win. And and so Penn State's success will help Michigan, will help Ohio State, will help Michigan State, help Purdue. That's it, because this conference is getting 4. If you look at the breakdown, it is a very good mid-major conference in profile.
Well, I got
that's it for years, Joby, but now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Penn State's remaining schedule here: Ohio State and Michigan at home, at Purdue, and a bye game in their last game on the road. They do have a chance to make a little noise if they can somehow win those 4 games.
Well, if they streak through that and finish and enter the conference tournament at 22-9, they will not just be in my field; they'll be in everybody's field.
They'll be wearing white if they win those last 4.
Yeah, good luck.
Well, then you look at Nebraska's last 4. I mean, they got to win. If they win their last 4, they're safely in.
Matt, I'm going to buzz the puppet very soon, but Matt, big game Sunday is probably the best game of the week in the Big Ten. Ohio State at Michigan. Michigan team that could really use this win as well.
I think both teams could. I think Ohio State, they're the protected seeds. That win at Purdue is so big. That's like basically a 2-seed win there. But still, it'd be nice for them to win at Michigan if you want to lock up, because they've got a couple other road tests, including the aforementioned Penn State, that this might be a good idea to get this one in case you have a slip-up otherwise to keep your protected seed.
David, over in the Big 12 conference where, amazingly, we're in the middle of February and Kansas is not in first place, not even tied for first place. What
right, and again, we saw a rare thing out of Kansas this week, and that was a road loss. In fact, it was – I mean, Baylor led the whole way. They blew it open at the end. It was kind of a surprising result, not just that they lost, but that they were at no point really in control of the game. Baylor's best game of the year. Maybe it's just one of those anomalies where they played over their head. But how about this Texas Tech team? They've won – I mean, again, I think that their profile is really good, but more than importantly than that, I think their team is really good. They've won 6 in a row, including 3 on the road. They have a road win at Kansas. And when you look at the stretch of games that they have between now and the end, you get the sense that their last 6 are a lot easier than the 6 in a row that they've already won. And can this Texas Tech team, and you might recall, we edited it out for some reason, but I, back in October, called this that Texas Tech would unseat Nebraska. I did. If they were to win out or just drop one the rest of the way, don't you have to consider them not just for protected seed, but for a 1 seed?
I agree with that. And if you look at the conference over here, Joby, you're our numbers guy. Have you ever? I don't think it's ever happened.
No.
Every single metric for every team in this conference is 1 or 2 figures. There's no triple digits anywhere.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's been what it is all week, all year. You're going to see what's remarkable to me is Baylor is the great story here, because Baylor entered last week in the J&G and whatever metrics. They entered it in the 80s, 90s, and forgotten. Then all of a sudden they go out and obviously beat. They went on the road in the Oklahoma situation. Then they go out and beat Kansas, and now they're playing Texas right now in a very tight game up in Austin. They could easily come away now with 3 very quality wins, and all they did was beat the top of the conference, the middle of the conference, and the bottom of the conference, and they come away with 3 really quality wins.
And I think if you look at overall at Baylor in this conference, they have the sweep of Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
This would give them a sweep over Texas if they win tonight.
And the J&G has, I don't want to harp on, has them as the very last team in the field. And not saying that is where the committee has them and all that, but they're close. If they're not in, they're now close. And they weren't even they were miles away last week at this time. And now they're close to in, if not in. That's what the Big 12 does. Oklahoma State could do it. I don't know if Iowa State could, but Oklahoma State can do it. Anyone from this conference can play their way in. They can also play their way out by being at 500 overall or below. But this is definitely a situation where the 5-7 Baylor record, the 5-7 Texas record, the 5-7 TCU record, those are 3 teams that are in or right at the bubble in right now, even with a conference record losing.
This is crazy to think about, and I know we got kind of a log jam, at least at the bottom of the league, with everybody kind of logged up at 5-7. But this Baylor Texas game that we're watching here could conceivably be the 8-9 game of the conference tournament. I mean, that is almost unbelievable.
And it's an 8-9 game in the NCAAs. Maybe.
Yeah, it's not far off of an 8-9 there either.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, could we potentially have a 9-bid Big 12 out of 10 teams? Isn't it conceivable?
Probably. I think the number's not 9. I think 8 will either be in, or like one of those 8. If maybe not 2 of those 8 will be like literally like the first 4 out. It's going to be close. I don't think 9, because I don't think the numbers are going to quite work that way. Iowa State's been a little too frisky to get 9 where you're 9 of them are 8 and 10 and better. I think you're going to probably need to be 8 and 10 to get in still. Texas is the one because they had such a good non-conference SOS. They might be able to get in at 7 and 11, but the others I think all need 8 or 10. I think Oklahoma State and Baylor probably would both need 9 and 9.
Well, I got to say here's the upcoming games in the Big 12. And if you want to highlight the good game, you could just highlight all of them, correct?
Yeah.
David?
Yeah, and it's been that storyline all year. We knew it would be, and it's just been probably one of the more exciting regular seasons that we've had. And of all teams, and I realize that this is part of the storyline, just kind of look who's in first. Like, how cool is that?
I know our colleague Titel's not here, but let's take a quick look over at the Pac-12, where it was a bad week for Washington. But Joby, are they still in the field despite the losing both games at the Oregon schools?
I don't know. I think this is because, and one of the reasons that hurts Washington, there's an old expression that Jerry Palm quotes, which in theory is accurate. Conferences don't get bids, teams get bids. I actually do think they're subconsciously is a sub in, sub out among conferences, and very often in common situations. UCLA's great week and Washington's bad week might actually flip. Great win, I should say, for UCLA. might actually flip those teams' positions. And if UCLA's in this field, it very well could become at the Huskies or the Trojans' expense.
As far as Washington goes, sometimes we wonder what's worse. Is it worse to get blown out like they did at Oregon, or does it hurt more to lose against like Oregon State, where you're losing on a buzzer 3?
The answer to that question is yes.
No, I disagree there. I think that that the Oregon State loss is so much worse than the Oregon loss. Oregon at least has a bit of a pulse that it's better to get blown out by Oregon and beat Oregon State than to get than to maybe have a close loss to Oregon and get beat by and beat Oregon State. So yeah, I think that the Oregon State loss is the one that just crushed Washington this week.
Chad,
but Matt, talk about another team that got
Chad,
crushed this week.
It's better to get blown out at Oregon and beat Oregon State than to barely lose to Oregon and beat Oregon State. It's the same.
No, it's lose Oregon State. I think that the worst loss I'm saying is the close loss to Oregon State. That is a lot worse than the Oregon game, no matter what the score had been, whether it was close or not close. Maybe I said that wrong, but
yes, I
Matt,
think you did say that wrong.
Yeah. Well, David, then I just got to do this to myself.
Thank you for the first time ever.
USC. I know it was at the two best teams in the conference, arguably, in Arizona and Arizona State, but they in trouble now?
I think so. Like, I didn't think they were as safely as people thought beforehand. Like, most of their resume was a very good week at the Diamond Head. And other than that, their resume was pretty empty anyway. And now I think that Arizona State's ones could be very regrettable because they led the entire game and blew it right at the last minute or two. I think they wanted to stall ball a little early in that, and then Arizona State hit a couple of wild shots. But now that's what I think they're going to really regret because they don't have a lot of meat on their resume anyway. It's not like their power ratings are across the board, bubble in, bubble out. So I think this week hurts them severely, and they probably need at least 4 out of 5 now the rest of the way.
Of course, the other side of the coin is for Arizona State. They finally get a much-needed weekend sweep of UCLA and USC, and sure enough, look who they have waiting for them on Thursday.
Yes.
Yeah, David, this is going to be a fun week of the Pac-12, which we haven't had very many of so far this year. But between the Arizona State game Thursday, the Southern Cal schools hosting the Oregon schools, and Washington hosting Utah and Colorado, a lot of interesting games. That's rare to say this week. Right. In the Pac-12.
Well, I think Washington, who you already talked to, I mean, at the very least, they're on the bubble, and when you're on the bubble, you're running out of strikes. So they need both of those. Not so much that those are wins that they need, as it is losses they can't afford. But really, that game on Thursday is going to be a zoo. I'm just looking forward to that Arizona State game.
And they will have the current of distraction ready to go there. Should be fun.
Yeah, and it is a little bit of a rivalry.
And before you go, Chad, one team I want to highlight real quick that has silently got themselves back into the bubble discussion is Utah. The win at Arizona State is now starting to come into play. They're ahead of Washington now on the pecking order, so to speak. I would say UNLV's the only bad loss on the resume. That is a bubble resume right there that we cannot just dismiss. I'm not saying, they're in or et cetera. But once again, Washington, your spot might be taken. USC, your spot might be taken by UCLA and Utah.
Oh, that Utah-Washington game Thursday night could be a huge one.
Exactly.
That would be a huge one for Utah, and then with the UCLA, USC next week as well. Probably that makes noise. Yeah. SEC, though, Joby, let me stick with you, where Auburn suffered a loss to Texas A&M last week, but maybe before beating Georgia. But maybe we got to talk more about this Texas A&M team because we'd almost given up on this team, and I have them storming up the charts to the point that they're looking like they're easily wearing white at this point, aren't they?
Look at the predictive, both metrics, the predictive except for BPI. The metrics are pretty similar. whether it's J&G and KPI and strength of record, they're all in that 5-6 range. And that's where I think that probably is where they are because of what they're doing right now. The Auburn win was necessary for it. And the committee will say, hey, they're healthy now. The team, they went through a lull, and now they're healthy. I'm not saying, that means they're going to get the 1 seed, 2 seed, 3 seed we were talking about at the beginning of the year. But I think that the committee is going to forgive the lull if they finish with the strength that they've shown lately, like the win against War Eagle.
Well, unfortunately, they're not healthy, or at least, like Dwayne Wilson's now. His knee totally gave way. He's out for the year. They've sort of had replaced him in the rotation already, but it's a shame. Like he was already playing out a partially torn ACL. And I think this week it totally gave way, and he's now done for the year. Probably will need reconstructive surgery.
Well, David, if this A&M team keeps winning, especially with 4 road games, but every game on there is somewhat winnable, I think.
Yeah.
If they can prove that they can win despite the injuries, could this team even sneak into a protected seed, into a 4 seed?
Yes. Well, think about what you're saying. I mean, all these games are winnable. If they win them all, those 4 games on the road, and keep in mind, they won at Auburn at full strength. And look at what they did before they, sort of had injuries and suspensions and all that. The way they're playing now, and I realize, like Matt has a good point, they did lose a key player, and that's going to hurt. But the way they're playing now, they could win all 6 of those, and then depending on what they do in the conference tournament, they could get a protected seed. I mean, their metrics would certainly show it, and I never gave up on this team. You all did, but I have been champion. When they were 2-6 in league play, I said, just wait.
You didn't mock us at all.
No, not at all.
For talking about a 2-6 A&M team. You did not mock us at all.
No.
Stalika, I'm looking at the SEC standings here. First place, second place, third place, fourth place. I'm having a lot of trouble finding Kentucky. I got to read halfway down the page. What the hell's going on?
You might not be able to find Kentucky after their trip at Auburn because they already got their doors blown away at Texas A&M and also ended up losing at home to Tennessee, who had solidified themselves into protected seed territory for the committee.
Yeah, they went on vacation this Saturday, but outside of that, I agree.
And it was the first time in 20 years that Tennessee did sweep Kentucky in the regular season.
And they were so excited that they took the game against Alabama. But,
especially looking at their schedule, they're right now we're projected to be about 9-9 because I think they'll be dogs in all 3 of the road games.
I agree, but I still think 9-9 is enough. 9-9 is they're inside the bubble.
Yeah,
there's way inside.
They're not going to miss the field, I don't think. Unless they go 0-6 or 1-5. But this is not a Kentucky profile. I mean, what the hell? It's just we don't see this stuff from Kentucky yet.
No, this is an 8-9-10 seed profile that maybe now, hopefully, will start being treated as an 8-9-10 seed. I think they've been all along almost.
Right. I mean, the last time they had a profile like this, I think it was it 2014?
Yeah, when
13.
they made the finals.
Yeah, they went in there, and then they went all the way to the Final Four and lost in the championship game.
Hey, I don't want, be very blunt. As a Virginia fan, I don't want to be playing Kentucky and Charlotte. Sorry. You guys,
You would clobber them.
I would think Virginia would match up extremely well, but with the athleticism, come on. They can beat anybody on a given day.
Well, as a Nebraska fan, I wouldn't want to play them either.
It is a huge week for both teams we just discussed. A&M is at Missouri and at Arkansas. Kentucky has that game at Auburn, followed by a home game against Alabama. So big week for both those teams here in the SEC.
Can we have an 8-9 Louisville, Kentucky? That would be so much fun.
Matt, over in the American, Cincinnati undefeated and clearly on pace for a 1 seed.
Maybe if they beat either Xavier or Florida, they would be. I was a little surprised the committee gave it 2 seeds because their resume is still a little bereft to be up on the top couple of lines. But, yeah, you keep running through the American, they'll probably lock up at 2. But I think they probably need to actually sweep Wichita to do that. Even 1 loss. So, any losses right now, that takes a little shine off their great overall record.
Well, if they run through the American, they're getting a 2 because their schedule's backloaded and they already are at the 2 line. So, yeah, I agree with that. But when you look at what they did this last week, UCF and SMU are not tournament teams, but they're still teams that are tough to beat at home usually. Cincinnati just boat raced both of them. And I'm starting to think that while the paper isn't there, and it's not, this is a really, really good Cincinnati team that's playing better now than they have at really any point this year. And the conference kind of let them down a little bit. We were expecting SMU to be good, Wichita to be top 10 good. None of that really played out. Houston's probably been better than expected, but other than that, it's kind of been disappointing. Again,
I think Joby had the right word for them 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Well, David, I will say this, and when you pull up, don't do it yet until Chad's ready, but when we go back to the conference page, if you do a quick flip of and check the RPI column, which is still the baseline for what the committee uses, check out American. Type in Big Ten real quick. It's going to look really similar at the RPI level. I mean that's the point. They're doing. I mean, you got a bunch of high 100s. It's very similar. Big Ten has more teams, so one more very good team in the teens. But for that point, the American, it still is. They still are Anthony Michael Hall, but the fact that on paper. On paper, they are getting credit for all those quad 1, quad 2. That's when you look at their resume, that's what it equals. 5 quad 1 wins, 6 quad 2 wins. That's impressive to the committee and the sheer volume. And a lot of it is, SMU, Connecticut is a quad 2. Temple twice, and Central Florida twice. And Central Florida is a quad 1 win.
Well, we always need a 2 seed to lose to a 15.
Michigan State, Purdue play Indiana and get nothing. Just saying.
Well, you got to remember here also they have not played Wichita State yet. They've got 2 matchups with them to go this season also. So that's where we're going to find out about the Cincinnati.
And at Houston, who is in this field right now.
Yeah, I think they have the 3 toughest games left. So we'll see. Even if they go 2-1 in that, I'll start taking it probably a little more seriously as a guaranteed protected 2-3 level seed.
I know it sounds funny to say this, but also beware that Tulsa game because the Hurricane do have a knack for playing spoiler in terms of other.
Thank you.
Okay, let's do something serious here. David, on the right-hand side up there, Temple, we spoke about them last week, that they just need to keep winning. They picked up 2 more wins, 5 in a row now. How big is this game at Wichita State coming up on Thursday?
It's rather big. I like the way this Temple team's been playing. Again, I never gave up on this Temple team. I've been talking about Temple all year long, just like I have Texas A&M. And I think they have a span of games in front of them that, especially if they get that one at Wichita, everything else is winnable. And even if they don't get the win at Wichita, but they get all the rest of them, how can you not consider them? Because one of the things, and Joby might back me up on this, they're 15-10. And the first part of the RPI is your winning percentage. Now, a team like Cincinnati, there isn't a big percentage difference between being 23-2 and 30-2. It's like a 1% difference. If Temple wins 7 or 8 more games, their winning percentage will go up substantially, and I would think that all their numbers would along with it. Is that a fair assessment that their RPI is poised to move up more than anyone else?
Yes, beating bad. They've done what they need to show Clemson, Auburn, Wichita State. Yes, Matt, you're right. That Wichita State game's huge in reality. If they can do that, if they can then beat up on these other, scumbag type teams that have good resumes like Central Florida, then all of a sudden, blam, they're going to have an RPI. Their RPI is right now 39. It's going to get into the 20s really easy.
Yeah.
And really easy. And if all of a sudden you're looking at a Temple team, let's say they have 2 more losses, conference tournament at Wichita State, and they get 5 more wins. They're 20-12 with protective, or hell, not even just 5. Yeah. 6 more wins. 21-12 with tier 1 win, with 3 tier 1 wins that are legit in Wichita State, Auburn, and Clemson. The committee is going to look really, really, really long.
Yeah, I would circle that Houston game. That's the one probably more realistic that they could win. It might sort of be a two-way game.
Yeah.
And that, like, what who knows? That might be the differentiation if one of the two make it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. Let's take a couple of the conferences here. The Atlantic 10. I guess, if you look at some of the numbers, St. Bonaventure is still in the equation. I just don't think they've got the chances. But how about this roadie team, David? Are they going to lose ever?
No.
Until the NCAA tournament?
I think they're going to win out right through. And again, that's a testament. This is a really, really good Rhode Island team. The discrepancy isn't as big as Memphis with Calipari in the Conference USA days, but it's pretty large. No one else is really even within 100 miles of the NIT, with the exception of St. Bonaventure. If they lose, it will be because they absolutely blew it.
Well, they still have to go to both St. Bonaventure and Davidson, and lo and behold, they do go to Olean on Friday night.
Yeah, Slika, our weekly Friday night Rhode Island game, which seems to be an ESPN staple this year, at the Bonnies this week. It's clearly their toughest test of the season in conference, isn't it?
Yep, we have to credit Rocco to pointing this out on Twitter last week, where they're going to have 2 more Friday games after this as well, including one at Davidson towards the end of the year.
And Matt, we're in the over in the Big 12. Apparently, we're going to redo the Big 12 conference. Let's try again. How about over in the Mountain West? Are we done with the whole Boise State thing? And is Nevada in trouble now also with the Vegas loss?
Nevada, I think, could take one more and they'd be okay, because I know one of the Martin twins is actually missing UNLV games. I think if it comes close with them, that might be a factor, because I think he did play their next game that weekend. So,
are you saying take one more as in the conference tournament loss and still make it, or you take it saying a regular season and a conference tournament loss?
I'll say regular season and conference tournament, although in that scenario it's probably dated. But I think two more dated. If they won out and then lost in the conference tournament, they'd be like 9 or 10 seed.
Okay. Joby, is there any reason to even look at Boise State anymore after that Utah State loss?
Well, Boise needs to, they need to go out and they need to beat Nevada, maybe a couple more times, and one of those will be in the championship of the conference.
Yeah. I think that's probably a pretty good way of putting it, because I kind of hung on to Boise for a while, but that they needed to just about win out.
I think the only way Boise, even because this slipped them back, they need to beat Nevada at home. That goes without saying. That's huge. Wednesday night's amazingly huge for them. They can't lose to another team not named Nevada. I think they might be able to make it, depending on what the rest of the field does. If other teams fail, fall on their face. If Syracuse goes out and loses to Pitt and all that, they need some help. But they can do it, and they'll probably get some help if they win out and lose to Nevada in the conference finals. That's it. That's their option.
If they do that, they'd be co-champs in the league, if not outright champs. So
yeah, that's a very good point.
We also have to address the Boise and New Mexico game from Tuesday night.
Oh yeah. That was
a game where New Mexico led by, I think, 12 points in the second half, but Boise made a late run. They were able to come back and ended up with the game with the New Mexico player shoving the Boise guy, it seemed, just after the clock hit 000. So a little bit of a shoving match with the benches clearing afterwards.
Yeah, not really a fight as much as it was a shoving match. But, that was one that Boise really needed. I agree with Matt. I think that if they win out to the championship game and lose to Nevada, that they'll be squarely on the bubble and maybe they'll get in. I think short of that.
Well, David, we built it up last week here. Game of the season, the West Coast Conference, the rematch after St. Mary's won at Gonzaga. Gonzaga was going to St. Mary's. What a game it was going to be, and you to turn it off 5 minutes in because it was over and it was a snoozer the rest of
Yeah,
the
I was
way.
making popcorn at the start of the game, and by the time I sat down to watch it, the game was over. How about the Zag? I mean, this is a good St. Mary's team with awful paper and awful out-of-conference strength of schedule. But Gonzaga just went in there and just completely blasted them. And this was a building that was jacked for this game. I was really as impressed with that as anything that I've seen Gonzaga do all season, so much so to where I've been having them on the 5, 6, 7 line range. Is Gonzaga a protected seed caliber team? I know the committee didn't give them one. I would like to know if they were even discussed for one, but are they, if not on paper, on the court, is this one of the 16 best teams in the country? I think
I'd like
maybe
to know, like, if they watch either of the Arizona games this week, especially the UCLA one and then Gonzaga St. Mary's, in what world is Arizona about their team? I'd like to know that. It's sort of simplistic thinking, but look at all the metrics. Gonzaga is well ahead of them, at least in all the predictive ones that I'm more of a fan of. Watching by the court there about their team, I mean,
top 10 team in the nation now in the polls. Joby, what do you think? You've got them 18. Are they a protected seed?
They can be, without a doubt. You got. I mean, I think you can kick Oklahoma. Let's take what the committee did, and Matt's picking on Arizona. You can pick on Oklahoma too. I think the way they've played recently.
Just because they've lost 6 out of 8 does not mean they're in a slump, or whatever it is.
I think I'd put them in over Oklahoma out of that list, and I don't think there's anybody, maybe West Virginia, who would be ahead of them. Florida gives some, I have some Florida love here, but because of the SEC, strength. But yeah, they're definitely in the running for a protected seed. They went out. They will be, because someone else besides Oklahoma and others will falter, because that's just the nature of the beast. Not all teams are going to run the table.
Even if they're a 4 seed, then I would hate to be the 1 seed that sees under the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
It's going to be really important for whoever the 1 seeds are to make sure they're not the 4th number 1 seed that gets sent out west, because chances are that's where Gonzaga is going.
Right. Well, yeah. But you know what, Gonzaga. If I'm Gonzaga, I would very much want to get to that 3 seed, because I wouldn't want to play one of these disciplined. I wouldn't want to play Virginia or Villanova, for instance.
Oh, they're not going to be playing Virginia or Villanova. I don't think.
I wouldn't want to play Virginia or Villanova. Give me Michigan State as a 2 or something like that. I think Gonzaga run them out.
They would. I agree with that.
Well, there's the upcoming schedule in the West Coast Conference. And as we said with the Big 12, where every game is worth watching, and the West Coast, no games are worth watching.
BYU San Diego.
Okay, BYU San Diego. David will be watching that one.
Probably.
We just fast forward to the conference tournament final, Gonzaga St. Mary's Part 3.
I think we still have one more Gonzaga BYU game left before the season ends, if I'm correct. We can double check on that. But that might be the only other game worth watching here for the rest of the way. I can't even spell Gonzaga correctly, so we may never know.
I wasn't stuttering on that one, Chad.
Hey, I would rank this league ahead of most of the A-10 games.
There we go. At BYU, February 24th. That's the only game left of this that I'd even circle on the conference schedule, and I don't think the Zags are going to win that game. But let me go ahead and
lose that.
Yeah.
If it was in the kennel, I would actually take pause, given the streak that BYU had been on in the kennel.
Yeah.
But Gonzaga wins at BYU every year, and I expect them to do so again this year. Thank you, Joby. But on that note, let's run through for some final thoughts here, I guess. Let me start with you, Matt.
So we're seeing all of the power conferences, at least the ones with bloated memberships, looking at a 20-game schedule. I took a look at the Pac-12 standings, and I saw 9 teams over 500, and yet only anywhere from 3 to maybe at most 5 in the tournament. I'm thinking, boy, if you're bad out of conference now and you take a couple more of these games out, you'd be playing a lot of games against teams that are really going nowhere this year. I think these conferences are going to regret going to these 20 games, because it's risking a whole lot non-conference, which now with less games means less opportunities. That basically you're going to have to do good in your November tournament or your 1 or 2 home and home. So I think these big conferences, they're going to regret this, and I think this actually might be the one way you might see the bids become a little more equitable again between the top 6 leagues of, say, League 7 through 12.
I
He
agree.
wins. He wins. Give him the prize. Was
Matt has one Hoops HD for the week.
Yes.
Salika, you're up next.
Among SEC football and men's basketball head coaches, who do you think has the longest tenure at this point? That would be Ole Miss Sandy Kennedy, and we are actually going to be speaking of that in the past tense at the end of the regular season because he is going to be resigning at the end of the year, but will still be coaching for the Final Four games as well as the conference tournament.
He's going to coach in the Final Four this year. Is that what you just said?
Maybe the NIT or ACA Final Four.
yeah.
Toby, you're up next.
Interesting little tidbit that I have to talk about. Entering last week, only 2 teams have been rated number 1 in the major poll, or the AP or Baseball America polls since 1990 in football, basketball, and baseball. Those 2 teams were the Texas Longhorns and the Florida Gators. A new team has joined. The Virginia Cavaliers have now hit number 1 in all 3 of those polls. Nice little stat. Like I said, I will be buying my Who's Number 1 shirt because it means something.
And it's nice that you say this on the week the college baseball is about to be going to bat.
And Xavier actually cares about baseball right now, so hey.
Yep.
I'm going to throw my final thought in here before I go to you, David. And on these shows here, the Hoops HD report, what we always focus on is the major conferences, the multi-bid conferences. We also will, if it comes up, have focus on any other teams that are ranked in the top 25, but outside of those conferences. We are very close, and perhaps next week, should they go 2-0, maybe missing one more team. There they are, the New Mexico State Aggies just missed the top 25 AP poll today, number 26 in the nation. So congrats to the Aggies. They are about to break in those polls should they win their 2 games. But David, you're up.
Well, I do kind of have an under-the-radar thought. I tried to queue up the audio, but we might have to save that for Wednesday. Savannah State, well, I'll start at the beginning. They had a very rough transition. They came up about 12 or 13 years ago. I think in the 4-year transition period, they were 7-79. They had a season where they were 0-29. It was completely winless. They played for a while as an independent. They joined the MEAC. They actually had a first-place finish. I want to say it was back in 2013 in the MEAC. But overall, the athletic program has struggled, but it's been sustainable. And it was decided, I think, about a year or so ago, or sometimes last year, by the state. It is a state school that they should reclassify to Division II. The reasons they gave were bullcrap. They're just basically, in my opinion, being bullied by the state to transition down. They had a rough start to this year, but they were also ineligible for APR reasons. They filed a waiver and essentially, this is amazing. They did a lot of work with this because in filing a waiver, you have to basically demonstrate what was mitigating as to why you should get it and then how you're going to recover to it. The NCAA awarded that. They are eligible for the postseason now. They can play in the conference tournament. They can play in the NIT. And they can play in the NCAA tournament if they win the automatic bid. Tonight, they beat North Carolina A&T at home. The audio of the end of the game was fantastic. We'll see if we can share it with you on Wednesday. But they are now the outright first-place team. And, again, they will play – next year they're slated to play Division I. They had scheduled guarantee games. They're contractually obligated to play them. But after that, they might be on their way down. I think Chad's got a bracket with us. What an incredible story. And I would look – first of all, going to Division II makes no sense because you don't really save any money and you lose a lot of income. So your spending doesn't go down, but your income does. What a great story if they were to make the NCAA tournament this year.
David, there it is. Save the Tigers.
Yes, save the Tigers. We are going to start that.
People Division I.
Right, yes. And I don't even think if we do it again next year, there won't even be a discussion. This is the team of the people.
On that note, I do want to thank everyone for joining us on behalf of Matt Zukowski, John Slika, David Griggs, Joby Fortson. I'm Chad Sherwood. Save the Tigers, everybody. And
Save the
have a
Tigers.
good night, and we'll talk to you again real soon.